At dusk in Canberra, eastern grey kangaroos can graze beside roads while traffic moves through the same open landscape. In Brisbane, a carpet python may use a yard or a house for shelter. In Sydney, possums, bats, and other native animals live in parks, gardens, and bushland pressed against suburbs. Online, scenes like these are usually turned into a joke. Australia is the place where the wildlife is always waiting just outside the door. But the real story is more interesting. The animals are not crossing some clear frontier from wilderness into civilization. In many Australian cities, that frontier was never a clean line at all. The deeper question is why the wild world can remain so close to ordinary human life, and what happened to this continent to make that overlap feel so visible. Canberra offers one of the clearest clues. The city was planned around a landscape of hills, grasslands, and open space, and its network of nature reserves still threads between urban districts. That design gives residents unusually direct access to native habitat, but it also means habitat has direct access to the city. Eastern grey kangaroos live within and around the urban area. Road verges can become attractive feeding strips, especially where runoff keeps grass greener than the surrounding ground. A kangaroo beside a commuter road can look like an intrusion. Seen from above, the opposite becomes possible. The road is the newer object, cutting through a landscape that never stopped functioning as habitat. The same pattern appears in different forms along the East Coast. Sydney's parks, rivers, wetlands, and bushland fragments form networks used by native wildlife. Possums and bats can become familiar urban neighbors, while people living near bushland may see wallabies, wombats, koalas, or echidnas. Brisbane pushes the idea even further. In one ordinary inner-city property in Annerley, researchers spent a year cataloging the living things sharing a house and yard. They recorded 1,150 species of animals, plants, and fungi, including dozens of spiders and birds and several reptiles. The surprise was not that a hidden wilderness had been discovered behind the fence. It was that an apparently ordinary suburban block was already an ecosystem. That still does not explain why the Australian version of this story feels so distinctive. For that, the scale has to expand from the backyard to deep time. Australia's long isolation after its separation from Gondwana allowed lineages to evolve for millions of years with limited exchange with other continents. Isolation was not the only force, but it helped produce an exceptionally high level of endemism. Australian government biodiversity assessments estimate that roughly 87% of native mammals and about 93% of native reptiles are endemic, found naturally nowhere else. Australia also holds around half of the world's marsupial species. The point is not that isolation created more aggressive animals. It created a biological world that is unusually its own. Then climate reshaped that world again. Australia is the driest inhabited continent, yet it is also a continent of powerful rainfall variability. Large regions can move between drought, intense storms, and flooding. Those swings change the human-wildlife boundary almost overnight. During dry periods, animals may move toward watered gardens, road verges, and other urban resources. During floods, the movement can reverse direction and accelerate. Queensland authorities warn that snakes can seek higher ground and appear in unexpected places when floodwater spreads across their normal habitat. In the tropical north, crocodiles can also be displaced into flooded areas. The dramatic encounter is real, but the mechanism is often simple. Water has temporarily redrawn the map. Urban structures can redraw it in smaller ways every day. A roof cavity is not a forest hollow, but to a possum it can provide shelter. A pile of timber or a gap beneath a shed is not a rock crevice, but it can function like one. Houses and yards can offer snakes warmth, cover, and access to prey, especially where rodents are present. Carpet pythons, common across much of Queensland, are non-venomous and often use suburban environments. Their presence can still be startling, but it reveals something important. Successful urban wildlife does not need a city to become wild. It only needs the city to contain enough pieces that still behave like habitat. This creates a paradox for modern Australian cities. The same green corridors that help conserve biodiversity can also keep wildlife moving through developed areas. Linked parks, rivers, wetlands, street trees, and bushland fragments are valuable because they prevent ecosystems from becoming isolated islands. But connectivity works for animals as well as for people. A creek corridor can connect a reserve to a suburb. A vegetated rail edge can become a route. A wildlife underpass can let animals cross infrastructure safely. A chain of gardens can supply food, cover, and nesting sites. From a planning map, these features look like green infrastructure. From an animal's perspective, they can be continuity. The overlap is not harmless. Roads create collision risks for kangaroos and wallabies. Pets can frighten or injure wildlife. Urban expansion fragments habitat even while conservation networks try to reconnect what remains. Snakes that enter homes may need professional removal, and animals displaced by extreme weather can end up in stressful encounters with people. Coexistence is therefore not the same as harmony. It is a management problem, an ecological problem, and, increasingly, a design problem. The challenge is to keep habitat connected without turning every contact point into conflict. That is why the familiar internet image of Australia misses the most revealing part of the story. The continent is not extraordinary because nature constantly invades the human world. It is extraordinary because the human world has been built inside a much older living system that is still active, still connected, and still capable of moving. In Canberra, that system can appear beside a road. In Brisbane, it can exist inside one suburban property. In Sydney, it can follow bushland and waterways toward back gardens. After drought or flood, the distance can shrink even further. The wild edge of Australia is therefore less like a border and more like a mosaic. Asphalt, eucalyptus, roof tiles, creek lines, gardens, reserves, drains, fences, and open grassland fitted together across the same ground. The closer that pattern is examined, the less surprising the encounters become. What looks like wildlife arriving from somewhere else is often wildlife moving through a landscape it never fully left. The remarkable part is not that the wild is always one step away. It is that, in many places, the step was never there.